The Big Interview with Off Script.
We're chatting with Tom Miller. He's a multidisciplinary artist from Florida. He's also the man who is filing a lawsuit against Salvatore Garau. And this is all because of that story we said of the artist Garau, who had managed to sell a sculpture of nothing for $18,000 US. Now, it followed that this lawsuit news came out because Tom Miller, who's the Florida artist, said in 2016 he had installed his own sculpture of nothing. This was in Gainesville's Bo Diddley Community Plaza.
Which, if you're interested, is an outdoor event space, by the way.
He erected it over the course of 5 days with a team of workers who worked as mimes to put this sculpture together. Now, considering that the interpretation of the sculpture is open to the audience, I don't know how they knew what they were sculpting or miming, but, you know, we'll leave that on. Apparently tens of people were there. Miller actually made a little short film about the work, a little mockumentary that features fake artists and also fake curators who are talking heads about the piece.
Nothing is the biggest work of art ever, because there is no challenge and there is no competition, there is no ego, there is no presence that can compete with nothing.
Nothing is the antithesis of what art actually is on a textbook level.
Well, thank you for that.
I do like the idea of making a satire out of art commentators, though. And now let's just get started with Tom. His sculpture of nothing. How did he get this idea in the first place? And what is a sculpture of nothing?
Well, I've always been impressed with the work of John Cage, who, as many know, wrote 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which was essentially a composition of a 4 minute and 33 second rest in music. It's legitimately music because it is the space between notes which has value in music, but it had never been done in such a provocative way. So I thought, well, in another form, what happens if you do nothing as sculpture and allow people to interpret it? I'm very interested in your question about what it is that I need to convince you of, or what generates skepticism. I'm very interested. I would love to explore that with you.
I'm interested to get into this too. I think the skepticism comes from this notion that art happens through the creation of perhaps something unique or something thought-provoking. I think just empty space, that there is actually no art in that is just all around us. Therefore, how do you take that and make it something that you would consider art as opposed to, you know, the space that's in me around in the studio that I'm in?
Let me propose this to you. All art begins with ideas. Could we agree on that?
Sure.
So wouldn't the most purest art be only an idea?
There seems to be, to me, something lacking in that. So an idea, sure, but what is the manifestation of that idea?
The conversation. The reaction to the work.
Okay, and what has that conversation been?
It has been absolutely fascinating. Many people are, as you say, skeptical. Many people interpret it as some kind of a ruse or a con. You know, one difference between my work and Salvatore's work, and let's not say it's a difference between the work, but rather the purpose of the work, is I would never sell my sculpture of nothing for money. It's not for that purpose. I'm not a commercial artist. I'm an explorer of ideas. And so immediately, you know, that strikes a difference between one artist and the other, not between the work, though.
I mean, obviously, the topic of is this even art came up. Now, from his point of view, what makes this art is the fact that the three of us in this room are talking about it.
But that was going to be my point. So in actual fact, the statue or the sculpture of nothing, the art which you finally got to, and by the way, great questions. You were putting him on the spot there, Sonal. The conversation is the art piece.
That's what he's saying. He was also, you see there, trying to put a differentiation between him and Salvatore's piece in saying that I would never sell my piece, but also saying, but that doesn't mean the art is different. He was very careful to say that the art is the same.
What do you mean his piece is in an outdoor space in Bo Diddley?
It was only in Bo Diddley for a few days. It turns out it's now in his backyard, he told me.
Oh, yeah,
is it? I did ask him about what specifically defines this space of his sculpture. So, for example...
Did it fit in his house, by the way?
That's a good question. That's a good question.
Did he have to build an extension?
Well, it fits in his backyard. But I asked him, what's the difference of the bounds of his sculpture of nothing versus the nothing that's around it?
That's up to the viewer. Another interesting thing about Salvatore is that when you purchased his sculpture, whomever that was, for something like $18,000 US, it comes with a set of instructions as to where to put it and how to display it. And it comes with a title. So, I don't restrict the interpretation in any way. I did this in 2016. This is kind of an old thing for me. And really the difference between this and previous investigations of nothing is that very specifically it's fashioning nothing into a sculpture. Part of what we did was a performance. We installed this sculpture. We set this up over a period of 5 days. It's about 30 feet tall, whereas Garu's is smaller than mine. And people started making language puns out of it. They would go on Facebook and tell me that I've done nothing, that there's nothing to see. Congratulations on nothing. And this conversation began to occur and got bigger and bigger on Facebook back in 2016, so much so that the mayor of our town and some of the officials in government were playing along with this comic aspect of this piece.
I'm sorry, but what he's questioning the comic aspect to it, as if it's just pure impudence from these people.
No. He's absolutely acknowledging the comic aspect to it. He's doing the opposite. He's saying part of it is humor and part of it is ridiculous.
Right, okay.
At least he's acknowledged that.
Yeah.
The Big Interview with Off Script.
I did talk to him a little bit about how people have reacted to his sculpture of nothing. And he said, you get quite the mix. You have people that are along the ride for the comedy to have a laugh at the whole situation. You have those who are taking it quite seriously and contemplating what it means, the unseen versus the seen and all the things that happen in between physical objects. I asked him, though, if anybody could be an artist of nothing or a sculptor of nothing. Could I, because at the time I was sitting in one of our studios, I said, I see a parking lot below me. Can I go hang out there and declare my sculpture of nothing was there and therefore nobody could use that parking lot? Are there limitations to sculptures of nothing and how they can be declared? He actually took this straight into his dispute with Salvatore.
I think everybody has the right to make art and to have ideas and to make use of nothing, but fashioning nothing into a sculpture specifically, not taking an aspect of nothing that already exists, a circle or a square, but fashioning nothing into a sculpture is the particular idea. And by that, I would certainly claim an attribution. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this because money has sort of tainted the work in a way, because it adds legitimacy for people if the art is valuable in terms of money. And so therefore, if Salvatore gets international press just because he's sold something for money, it then puts me, who originated this idea half a decade earlier, into the position of being the secondary artist, even if I was the first.
So okay, there's a pecking order going on here.
Just to clarify, this whole lawsuit against Salvatore is more about getting credit and attention. It's not necessarily about him trying to get money out of him.
Giving him airtime. Giving him precious airtime via 103.8.
He did make a point that the fact that this story has gone viral has done enough for him. He's already happy with where this is at, because I guess the newspaper, the publication that originally published about Salvatore's art did go ahead and there was a retraction and he was given credit. So he said, I've already been given what I need, essentially.
Yeah.
Now let's see what happens. Yeah, what happens with the lawsuit. We'll see. He did say, now when we get into the lawsuit, because I wanted to dig into this, because he said there's no difference in the idea between his sculpture of nothing and Salvatore's sculpture of nothing. And to take this further, I kind of had to buy into all of this, right? I asked him, can't you have different variations in the art or sculpture of nothing? Isn't this more of a genre than a specific piece? I asked him, why are they necessarily the same if they are sparking different conversations?
Well, let's, for the sake of argument, place Salvatore's sculpture and my sculpture in an open field without telling you which is which. Now, he's described his sculpture as 5 feet by 5 feet, or at least it needs that space in order to exist. My sculpture is bigger. But if you're looking at those two sculptures, let me ask you, do you think you would functionally see a difference in the work?
Well, I think by your own logic and what you said at the start of this conversation that we're having is that what makes it art is the conversation and the response that it elicits. So if it elicits different responses, is it not therefore different pieces of art?
Every question that you have asked and that I have asked is absolutely the purpose and is so fascinating. And I love reading other people's opinions of this. And I think the conversation continues to get furthered by any artist that approaches this topic. This topic of invisible art has been around. And like you said, many people find it skeptical or scammy. I think it's legitimate. But as I said, it's not for me the purpose of profit. It's for the purpose of discussion and reaction and exploration. And if somebody thinks this is completely stupid, as in some ways I do, as also being a multidisciplinary artist who's also a satirist, I'm okay with that reaction. It's profoundly stupid in many ways. And yet it's also one of the deepest questions we can ask of ourselves. What is the difference between what is and what is not?
Well, I appreciate that, but I don't feel like my question was answered there, because what I asked you specifically was, by your own definition, what makes this art is the response that it elicits. So if your art and Salvatore's art elicit different responses, is it not therefore different sculptures of nothing? I mean, the idea that you can only have one variation of a sculpture of nothing to me seems very limited.
Well, I have to be very careful here because I do have legal representation, but we did a letter. My attorney did. And what we are dealing with on the legal level is the idea. There is no functional difference between the idea of fashioning nothing into a sculpture that I have done or that Salvatore has done. That's what the lawsuit is about.
Well, and you also mentioned earlier that you were the first to come up with this idea of a sculpture of nothing. But in terms of going back in history, I mean, in 1985, both Andy Warhol and Yves Klein made art that was devoid of any physical content, in a sense, sculptures of nothing as well. Would they not be deserving of attribution? I mean, can you call yourself a pioneer in this or the very first to do it, even people who've done it before?
Many, many people have been working with this idea of invisibility in art. It's very, very specific what I am saying that I am the author of. Fashioning nothing into a sculpture. That's the point. Not taking an aspect of nothing that already exists, a sphere, for example, and imagining it on a pedestal with a set of instructions. If you look deeply into each and every one of those previous examples, you will discover a very slight difference from what I am talking about.
I think he was paddling there a little bit.
Just a little, maybe. So actually, I didn't realize this concept of a sculpture of nothing or art of nothing isn't that new. So Andy Warhol, back in 1985, decided to do a sculpture that was the essence of him. So he had a platform. He went and stood on the platform and left the platform. Therefore, he said what was there, the nothing, the space that was there, was actually a representation of his essence.
Oh, okay.
So that was, in a sense, a sculpture of nothing as well. So it's not actually that new. This concept has been around. He did approach Salvatore before the lawsuit, and Salvatore's response in the Facebook chat that they were discussing this on was that no one has the copyright to nothing.
Correct. I like Salvatore already.
Yeah.
Despite the fact he's also made a sculpture of nothing.
We did talk a little bit also about this broader trend in art that we've all been discussing. The idea of being able to declare anything art if you have the right standing in the art community. So I referenced, of course, the recent case of the banana taped to the wall. He had an interesting take to this, and I need to be clear, this is his own claim. I have not seen this verified anywhere, but he claims he has some inside knowledge.
The interesting thing that you mentioned with the banana, the question is that art or is that advertising? Because I happen to know some inside information about that banana. It was something that gave an awful lot of attention to that event, didn't it? So I happen to know that the person who bought the banana was a confederate of the artist. And so was the person who sort of violated the rules and went in and ate the banana. They're all in it together.
So you're telling me that was all planned. How do you have this information?
I can't tell you that. Isn't it a commercial if it's that? No, it still becomes art because it's a huge, huge topic of interest and discussion. So on one aspect, it's a promotional event. On another aspect, it becomes functionally a question of art, a matter of art, and ultimately of art.
So was that banana actually bought for that amount that was disclosed? I can't remember off the top of my head how much it was exactly.
Well,
or was that all staged?
Right. Well, rather than me get into trouble, I would like to say this. When you see a reality show, it's not real at all. Producers work on it. You know, they craft the story. It may be based in some sense of truth, but when people have cameras in front of them, they can't possibly be real because now they're in a performance, you see. And so, again, these are all topics that are of great interest, even if they repel somebody, even if people feel that they're being duped or that it's not truly representational of what they want art to be. Art has evolved like language. It's constantly under scrutiny. It's constantly filled with new ideas. This is a good thing, not a bad thing. You know, people look at Jackson Pollock. The art has value. It shook up the art world as much as many different things, pop art of Andy Warhol or Cubism from Picasso, all these different things. People started talking about it. But then there's always going to be somebody that will go into a gallery and go, I can do that, drip paint on a canvas. And then it begs the question, how do the experts tell the difference between a really, really bunch of amateur drips and, Pollock, Jackson Pollock?
I mean, I don't know what to make of that. I really don't know what to make.
It was one of the most bizarre interviews, I have to say, that I've ever done. Somebody's been in touch to say if he loses the lawsuit, Salvatore should just pay him with a pile of nothing money. Appreciate that.
I love that.
Amazing stuff.
Off Script with Chris Sonal and Robbie on Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.